All right, welcome everybody to the last session of TC Drupal Camp 2016. We're here to talk to you today about Backdrop CMS. We're really excited that you guys came to learn about it.
Wait, how many of you have heard of Backdrop before walking into this room and generally know what it is? Okay, so we're kind of preaching to the choir. I know some of you were at our training earlier this week. You're probably going to know everything we're going to talk about. But feel free, if you have new questions, to bring those up too. We're just going to talk to you a little bit about Backdrop and its similarities and or differences from the Drupal project.
So as you guys know, Backdrop is a fork of Drupal. We forked from very early Drupal 8, but in general it's so similar to Drupal 7 that you could safely say it's a fork of Drupal 7. And from the API standpoint and familiarity standpoint, it will fit right in with your existing Drupal 7 knowledge. We made Backdrop with the intention of basically fitting I guess what I would say Drupal into its traditional market, its market from maybe 5 or 6 years ago when Drupal was used as kind of the lightweight replacement for small websites, or actually large websites, but it was like the cheap version. Like Drupal was rapidly replacing a lot of really expensive systems that had been there previously. But now Drupal itself has become so kind of enterprise focused that Drupal itself has become like the expensive option now. And we're trying to make it so that we'll let Drupal go on Drupal 8's own kind of the enterprise space, and we will focus more in the mid-tier of the market, in between like where WordPress is kind of at the lower end and Drupal being up at the higher enterprise end of the market.
So how many people in this room have used WordPress? A few. And what about Squarespace? A few. So that's pretty good. I think in the Drupal world in general, a lot of us get so excited about Drupal that every single time somebody comes up to us with a project idea, we go, oh, we could do that in Drupal. And we don't stop to think about whether there's another tool that might be a better fit for that job. I know I worked at a lot of companies that only did Drupal, and every solution was visualized in Drupal, and there wasn't a lot of analysis from the client perspective of like, maybe there's something that might be better for you. I'm hoping that because Drupal 7 and Backdrop are so similar that people who are going into these new conversations with clients about doing Drupal projects will be able to kind of say, okay, maybe this project isn't necessary to do on Drupal 8. If we have something that might fit within your budget, we don't have to turn away this project. If they can't afford to do it in Drupal 8, we could do it on a faster building piece of software, like maybe Backdrop. So hopefully Drupal companies will start to say, this is a better fit for Backdrop, this is a better fit for Drupal 8, and then be able to keep all of that business. So hopefully that's what I'm starting to do. Hopefully other people will start to do that too. We want to talk a little bit about who we are and how we ended up here. We're the founders of Backdrop CMS. Right now I'm the project lead, which means I'm in charge of people, and Nate's the technical lead, which means he's in charge of code. So we're going to give us kind of our personal journey to where we are today.
So we are longtime Drupal developers. We've both been in Drupal for a decade about. We've done a lot of work on websites that you may have heard of, and a lot of work on a lot of websites that you probably never will ever hear about. But we've been doing development in Drupal for a really long time. And we've also been doing training separately and together for a really long time as well. Together we've taught over 1,500 students. I did a lot of online training videos for Drupalize Me, Drupal 6 and Drupal 7, CCK, Views, jQuery training. Jen did the training materials for in-person training that were distributed by Acquia. I did in-person training back in the day, 2005 onward, and Jen was the director of training at Chapter 3, flying all over the country doing in-person trainings. And I co-authored the first O'Reilly book for Drupal, using Drupal for Drupal 6.
And what this means is that we have a lot of experience trying to teach people how to do development with Drupal just as we've been doing. And so we understand some of those pitfalls for our first-time Drupal users about what it is that makes sense and what it is that doesn't make sense to people who are entering into the world of Drupal. And
we're core developers. My first core development work took place back in Drupal 6 days. I wrote the Ajax framework and the drag and drop table drag system that was in Drupal 6. To this day, I'm actually the file and image module maintainer for Drupal 7. So if you have an issue with those modules in Drupal 7, I'm the person that reviews them to get them into core. Even in Drupal 8, I was really active for several years of Drupal 8 development early on in the cycle, and I wrote the dialogue system that we still have today, as well as I was the main Drupal proponent for CK Editor over Aloha Editor, which actually Aloha Editor was actually in core, and then we took it back out and then put in CK Editor, which turned out to be very, very beneficial because Aloha Editor still doesn't have an official release, right? So that was good. We chose the winner there. And Jen?
I'm a little newer to core development. I was really active when Drupal 7 first came out and complaining that I thought it was too different from Drupal 6. And I started making a bunch of noise and finding a bunch of bugs and decided to try and fix them. I got my first fix into Drupal 7.14 and realized it wasn't a big deal to be a core developer. Anyone can do it. So then I started getting really active and I got involved in the Drupal usability team. We did a bunch of studies here in the Twin Cities about looking at the things that were wrong with people trying to use Drupal to build sites and trying to fix those. We did other similar studies at Google Campus, and I started fighting not only for usability, but also learnability because of all of that experience doing training, and got involved in working on the Twig initiative to make the theme layer, the front end, much easier for people to get into coming to Drupal from the HTML, CSS background. And so this is our example of how we see how decisions are made in the Drupal community and how we try and get change done initially in Drupal and now in Backdrop. And another thing that we've also gotten a lot of slack about for forking Backdrop was also potentially forking the community. But long before I'd ever even gotten a line of code into Drupal, I was super active in the Drupal community in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been organizing the Bay Area Drupal Camp since 2007. I helped organize DrupalCon San Francisco in 2010. And Nate and I together spend a lot of time traveling around the country and around the world now, talking at different Drupal camps, figuring out what it is the community wants, what it is they like, what it is they don't like, what it is they're trying to learn, what it is they're struggling with. And the things that we're feeling are not something we thought up alone in a room talking to each other. It is something that's coming from the larger Drupal community in terms of the problems that everybody's having and the solutions that we're seeking. So hopefully we're doing what the community wants. That's what we're trying to do. So that's what we're after here. The biggest takeaway, though, is that Backdrop is founded by people who love Drupal. Drupal has been a huge part of our lives for a really long time. We are very committed to both the software project and the community around it. Drupal has significantly helped all of my clients in ways that I think that they couldn't have achieved without the software. And Drupal has also affected my life in a really big way that I think I wouldn't be the person I am today without the involvement with both the software and the community. So this is a passion project for us. We love what we do, and we hope that we're going to create something other people will love as well.
So we do have some qualms with Drupal 8, and that's, was the driver for creating a fork of Drupal, of course. And there's some, mostly around the level of abstraction and complexity is one of our biggest issues with Drupal 8, but also just the amount of shifting from major version to major version. Like Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 was a painful transition for a lot of people with the introduction of the field module instead of CCK, and that transition was really rough. And we've had a couple of rough transitions for every major version, but they all pale in comparison to the Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 jump. They're really different pieces of software in the way that they are architected. A lot of the code that was written for Drupal 7, it's basically rewrite everything in order to get that same code working again on Drupal 8. And so we saw what happened in the Drupal world, and it was largely due to the management structure of Drupal, that basically anybody can do anything they want to the software. They just come in, and if they put in enough time and effort, then they can make any change they want to the software system. And that's a legitimate way of working. It serves Drupal really well, but it has had some downsides that it results in these the lack of compatibility with previous versions and drastic differences in code. And it also tends to skew the development towards the kind of use cases that the developers need, like which makes sense again, but it's like a lot of times you end up with complex solutions to things because the people that are writing the code have complex needs, which all makes sense. But in the case of Backdrop, we want to try to cater to a simpler mindset that we need to put some reins basically on the development workflow and make sure that we guide the project in a particular direction that maintains some of the simplicity and consistent decision-making processes, as opposed to it just being kind of fluid and organic the way that it is in the Drupal world. And the way that we're doing that is with this concept called the Project Management Committee. And the Project Management Committee was created as the guiding force of the Apache project, the original Apache web server project, but also now the Apache Foundation, which oversees 20-some major software projects, including not just the web server, but also things like Cordova and Lucene and Solar, OpenOffice. Like, Apache oversees an enormous number of major open source projects, and they all use the Project Management Committee model. And the project committee, before I get into it more, we've recently been expanding the Project Management Committee within Backdrop. It used to just be Jen and I, and that was like not the point. Like, the entire point of the Project Management Committee was to have a group of people rather than a benevolent dictator for life, which is the way a lot of open source projects are running, including Drupal. Have a committee of people that can be more permanent and more, not more permanent, but more, like, we can bring in people as we need to, and it's not like a lifetime commitment for any one member to be
more flexible.
It's more flexible, exactly.
So what we ended up doing is drawing in a bunch of people from all different parts of our community. A lot of open source software ends up being guided by developers, and that is really fun for all of the other developers in the project. But if you were like running a business and you let your developers steer the whole ship, you would often end up with a product that wasn't really what your clients wanted. And sometimes it's good to have like project managers and business people kind of put the reins on the developers and go, whoa, I know that looks like fun, but that's not the most important thing to focus on. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is get people from all over the community to be able to say, like, what is the most important thing, not what's the most fun thing. And so we have a representative on the project management committee from a bunch of different areas, and the areas will shift, of course, depending on what our community starts to look like. But right now we've got somebody that's really familiar with the back-end APIs. We've got somebody that's really familiar with the front-end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what's going on in the web today. Somebody that's focused on the business angle, like what can you sell to a client? What are your clients complaining about not existing yet? As somebody who's just a site builder, a complete non-coder who's using the tools that we've created to build sites. What is their experience like? What are the pieces that they're missing in the software that they need to use? Somebody who has extreme focus on user experience, like what is it like for not just the site builder user, but also the end user when you deliver it to someone? What is the editorial experience like? And of course, it's good to have the voice of a core committer who they can say, no, that's not possible, or we need to do that in the next version, not this version. So that's kind of the makeup of our project management committee today. That'll, of course, shift and change over time. We're also looking at having interesting things represented in our community, like do we have a diverse variety of genders and ethnicities and geographic locations and other things that might be really important to make sure that our community as a whole is represented in the management structure that's guiding it.
So the Project Management Committee has a number of responsibilities. Conflict resolution, when there's members of the community that are arguing back and forth and their tires are basically spinning, then any issue or any complaint can be escalated to the Project Management Committee for conflict resolution, which usually would result in some kind of vote about like which way we should go on particular things. Sets the overall direction of the project. Actually, the setting of the direction of the project is actually mostly through establishing the philosophy of the project, the mission statement, the goals of the project, and things like that.
Target audience.
And of course can change the project philosophy if needed. So rather than being really kind of ambiguous with what the goals of the project are or where the project is heading, the project management committee tries to make it so that we have very explicitly stated what we're trying to do as a piece of software, and sets out like a roadmap and a plan so that people can see when they're getting involved in the project what it is that this project is actually trying to accomplish.
And this is something that we did intentionally, because when we first got started in Drupal, we read the Drupal stated philosophy and we were totally behind it. And then fast forward 10 years, and Nate and I are arguing in the issue queue against a lot of the things that are happening in Drupal 8, thinking that everybody is on the same team with the same philosophy. And when we went back and examined that, we realized that the things that were stated were really vague, and anyone can kind of bring their own interpretation to the table. And so you end up arguing with people where you think you're on the same team and you realize you have really different perspectives of what the software should be doing. And at the end we realized that it's not that we're wrong, it's just that we have a different philosophy than a lot of other people we're working with. And that's totally fine. Drupal 8 is going to create a really powerful, amazing piece of software, but for a different intended audience than who it is that we're after. So in order to prevent that same thing from happening in our community 10 years down the road by all these people who didn't know what they were getting into, we figured we better redefine and restate who we're for, what we're about, what's important to us, and if that should change, as things do over time, update that so that we're not looking at something that's 10 years old and out of date and doesn't apply to the project as it is today.
Right.
So that's a job for the PMC.
Yeah, one of our friends, Emma Jang, gave a talk a few DrupalCons ago called "The Danger of Having No Why," basically pointing out the fact that nobody knows or cares about the Drupal philosophy. Like, what is the philosophy of Drupal, or the mission statement of Drupal, or the stated goals of Drupal? Like those, there is in fact a page that lists those things, but it hasn't been touched, or I mean, it's buried in the handbook, and it hasn't been updated in years. And it's one of these things that it's never been a focus for the Drupal community, like stating what it is that we're trying to do. We're all just doing it all at the same time, and it's mostly just a, one issue at a time. Like, oh, this would be good, this would be good, and our project is largely driven by, individual blog posts and people marketing their intentions and trying to say, like, this feature would be really great, and then they write blog posts about it, and then people are like, okay, let's do it, and then it gets done. But there's very little actual, like, overall guidance for the Drupal project. Intentionally. Yeah, maybe intentionally, but I don't know. It's also just kind of, it's just never really come up. So anyway, so in order to actually guide the project, in order for the PMC to actually be effective, we need to actually document what it is that we're trying to do. Like, why does this project even exist? And what is it that, how are we going to do something in a way that is different from than Drupal 8? So we worked to set out the guiding principles of our project and why we exist. And you can read about it at backdropcms.org/philosophy. And they differ from Drupal, it turns out. And this, number one, is probably the biggest difference from Drupal for sure, and that backwards compatibility is important. The backwards compatibility means, in a lot of times, affordability, that you can, by providing easier transition between versions, that makes it so that your code is going to last longer, that the knowledge that you have, if you've been learning a system, that it will last for a longer period of time, that you can move incrementally from version to version without needing to throw away all of your code and make giant reinvestments every time you want to do an upgrade. Why don't you talk about these?
So, and this is also a little bit different too. In the Drupal world, everybody really likes doing the latest and greatest, most popular new thing that's going on, which is good for PHP, it's good for the web development in general, but there is a massive amount of people out there who don't necessarily need the newest, latest, and greatest. There's a big kind of common denominator of people who know PHP who don't know object-oriented programming. And so Backdrop wants to write code that applies to the majority rather than writing the best possible code, where Drupal is always about making the code better. So that's a significant difference in philosophy as well. And then the next one too is a little bit similar, making sure that the features that are included in Backdrop Core apply to the majority of people who are running the sites. So if there's something that somebody creates a feature request for that says, hey, I have this client that has this need, they really want to be able to store their field data in MongoDB, we would say, does the majority of the community need that feature? And if the answer is no, then that is not something that belongs in core. That should be a contrib module so that they can do that there. Same thing is true for running software on a Microsoft SQL database system or something that's not MySQL. That was something that was really important to the Drupal community 5 years ago. We managed to get this whole database abstraction layer in that was super robust. But today you look at who's actually using it, and it's less than 1% of sites running it. So we looked at stuff like that and said, if we cut these things from Backdrop does not apply to the majority of users, it gives us a lot of benefits. We can decrease the abstraction, which will make it easier to learn. We can write MySQL specific performance optimizations to make it faster to run. There are some benefits to writing code and providing features that only apply to the majority of use cases. And so that's also significantly different from the way things get done in the Drupal project. We also, of course, want to make sure that those people that do have those needs can still meet them, and that's why we want to make sure that Backdrop can be extended. Drupal is a fantastic project on its own, but it is really made what it is by the fact that there are so many modules that let you do whatever you want, and that is because of the amazing API. We need to keep that same thing for Backdrop, especially if we're going to be removing features from core. And then the last one is to be able to meet low system requirements. Being able to run Drupal on shared hosting became a little bit of a impossibility in the Drupal 7 cycle, just because the amount of resources that Drupal needed kind of started to extend what shared hosts would usually offer. And then in Drupal 8 that got worse again. So in Backdrop we're like, well, let's take a look at what it is that's requiring all these resources and see if we can scale that back. See if we can create software that you can run on more affordable hosting, and that'll help, of course, make the project itself more affordable. And then the last one is also significantly different from, actually there's another one, but the last one that's significantly different from Drupal is to plan and schedule releases. So Drupal has had this long history of saying, oh, when is Drupal 8 going to come out? When it's ready. And it's really hard to budget that. Like if you're going to your clients and saying, oh, we're going to need an upgrade. Okay, when do I need to budget for that? I don't know, maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now. And so what we want to do is have a release every 4 months. There's a release, there's a release, there's a release. You can say, budget every 4 months, you're going to need an upgrade. Or if you want to skip one, 8 months out, you're going to need an upgrade. And if the features that we want to put into that version aren't ready, doesn't matter. We're still going to release on time and push the feature to the next version. It's a model that's worked really successfully for WordPress, and so we're adopting that for Backdrop as well. And the last one, exactly the same as Drupal. Obviously, we want to remain free and open source. We are a fork of the Drupal project. We've inherited its license because of that. But this is also something that's really important to us, too. That's why we got here in the first place, is because we have this amazing free open source software. And we want to continue that tradition for Backdrop as well. So we also came up with a mission statement, something that Drupal has suffered from a little bit. They have a mission statement, it's not terribly clear. We also went to give a talk at SymphonyCon last year and studied their mission statement. They also didn't have one that was great, and we realized that we couldn't point out the inadequacies of other projects' mission statements without one of our own. So we sat down and tried to figure out what it is we're really about. And we came up with this. Backdrop CMS enables people to build highly customized websites affordably through collaboration and open source software. So obviously we're getting collaboration and open source in there. That's really important to us. People. Backdrop is about the people, it's not about the code. And highly customized is hopefully helping us get one step beyond the WordPresses of the world, making it a little bit more robust. But the one thing in here that's significantly different that we think is going to help set us apart is this word affordably. Because we're here because we believe in decreasing the long-term costs of website ownership, which means that from now on, or from when we created this statement on, we're going to be focused on what it is that makes a website affordable.
Yeah, and this all comes down to why you would use any library or any CMS in the first place, is that the point of all libraries and systems is to save you time and save you money. If it's not saving you time, if it's not lowering the cost to perform some specific task, then it's not doing its job. Like, that is why we have systems, and making sure that we can bring down the cost means that it will be the most useful library if it saves you the most amount of time. So how can we actually make things affordable? Like, what is it that we can do differently to actually increase the affordability of owning a highly customized website? Some of these, again, like overlap with Drupal, but some of them we're trying a different tack on things. Increase the out-of-box functionality. If the out-of-box experience provides all of the features that you need, like rather than like Drupal 7, the very first thing you have to do with any Drupal 7 website is go and download views, right? Because every single website needs some specific modules, but they're not included in core. You can just look at the top 10 modules of Contrib and say, why aren't these in core? They're installed on like 80% of Drupal websites. They should be part of the out-of-box functionality. Making maintenance easier, again, like backwards compatibility is a big part of this, that if your code is not shifting out from under you so regularly, then it makes the long-term maintenance of your site easier. Always providing an upgrade path, again, a little bit of tying into the maintenance easier part, that every single version of Backdrop, and we started even today with from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, that there's an upgrade path as though Drupal 7 were the previous version of Backdrop, or Backdrop was the next version of Drupal. So you can upgrade a Drupal 7 site to Backdrop. The upgrade actually only takes a couple of seconds.
The first time we'll show you.
Yeah, and it will migrate your content types, and it will migrate your views, and all of the modules that we've put in the core, even the ones that are from Contrib, link, email, date, path auto, token, redirects, transliteration. We will migrate all of those settings from the contributed equivalents into the core versions in Backdrop. Simplifying the architecture. This was what Jen mentioned, like we only support MySQL databases, for example. Right now we still have a lot of the abstractions in place because we need to maintain the compatibility, right? So now we have some abstractions that we don't actually need anymore, but we're working on chipping away the lower end of the abstractions because you can't actually use like an alternative database system right now. So as
a simpler architecture will decrease the amount of time it takes your developers to get familiar with your software and to perform daily tasks.
Right. And make it so that we're considering the cost of change when we are changing APIs or when we're adding new features. That we want to make it so that we can make it as easy as possible, even though we're making changes. Like, change is inevitable. You can't get around it. Like, we need to be changing with the times as needed, but we also need to be considering what the cost of each of those changes actually has on our community. Yeah, and we're still trying to find more ways of making websites affordable, but that's one of our focuses is we're always trying to think of how we can make websites more affordable.
This is the kind of thing where in Drupal, we're starting with something that's really expensive. We've got a lot of things to do to make that a more affordable piece of software. We picked kind of the biggest low-hanging pieces of fruit, solved those problems, and shipped. Right, that's kind of our thing, is only change a little. But over time, we're going to have to be looking like, okay, as of today, what is the most time-consuming thing involved with maintaining a Backdrop site, and fix that. So the next version of Backdrop should contain some more significant improvements and decreasing cost. Same thing is true in, hosting, like whatever the hosting will do in the future. That might change how we're dealing with performance or resource consumption, but it's something that's in our mission statement, it's in our goals. We're always going to be fighting to figure out how to make that more affordable for our users.
So this rhetorical question, like, you can use Backdrop today. It's actually been out for quite a long time. Our first version was January 15th, 2015, was the 1.0 release. 1.1 came out 4 months later on May 15th, and 4 months later 1.2 came out on September 15th. Again, 4 months later 1.3, and 1.4 is where we are currently, and come September 15th, 1.5 will come out. This is that planned and scheduled releases statement that every 4 months a new version of Backdrop comes out that includes new functionality. Again, like, it's API compatible backwards, but and it provides upgrade paths as we move forward. But the predictability of regularly scheduled releases every 4 months.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, what do you do about security? Drupal is constantly or frequently having security releases. So do you have to deviate from your 4 month schedule?
Yes, actually, this is
These are for minor releases. So we actually have 3 numbers, and every release it's 1.1.1, right? And all of that last number, those are bug fixes and security releases. But those are non-API breaking changes, so you can apply them at any time and they won't affect whatever else you're doing. This is new features going in.
Yeah, so we actually regularly release minor, or like bug fix releases as well. So yeah, we actually even coordinate with the Drupal security team that when we have issues that affect both Backdrop and Drupal, which is just about every issue actually that we encounter, we coordinate and simultaneously release on the same day our security updates. Yeah. And in the contrib world, we need a lot of modules, right? So all through each one of those minor releases, we've been adding more features into core. So these blue checkboxes are now our current status of the modules that are in core from the contrib world. And as you can see, all of these are the top modules. As you can see, we've moved in almost all of the top modules into core. And almost all of the popular contrib modules have been ported over to Backdrop that are available for use today. Entity reference actually is going in core for the next version, so it'll be in 1.5. We actually have, and we have ports of we have node reference and user reference, but not entity reference. But we're making an entity reference for core right now. And in the world of total number of modules, I know Drupal has tens of thousands of modules, so seeing only a couple hundred is like, oh, how cute. But it's also 284 contrib projects is really pretty astounding for a project that has only been around for a year and a half. And we have 196 total official releases. There's some really fascinating integration. We do all of our development on GitHub, but we have some really interesting integrations with our backdropcms.org hosted project module. We use project module like Drupal.org does, but we use GitHub for all of the Git repositories, issues, and releases, downloads, and hosting.
So the big number, the 284 at the top, those are modules that are on GitHub, so that's either completely out or people working on them. And the little number 196, that's modules that have been stamped. This is good to go. You can install it on your site today. So we've got a lot of work going on currently as well as what's already done.
And in the community, we have 54 members of the contrib group that wrote those 200-some projects. We have around 75 people that have made core contributions, via pull request or test reviewing or documentation. And we have 260 people that have registered on backdropcms.org.
Which is impressive today because there's nothing you can do on backdropcms.org other than create a profile.
Yeah.
But we do have some great features coming up. We're going to be launching a forum. We're going to be setting up a showcase. So anyone who's built a site on Backdrop can put it up there. We've already got a company listing, so if you're interested in accepting work on Backdrop, you can list yourself there. And we're going to have a bunch of other cool things coming in the near future. So get your little user ID today.
Yeah. And if you want to get involved with the Backdrop project, then you can visit backdropcms.org. It's the flagship website. We're on GitHub, github.com/backdrop. And we use an online chat tool called Gitter that integrates with GitHub for our regular chats, Slack-like, IRC-like. If you want to communicate with people immediately, there's always somebody hanging out in there. And if you say, hello, is there anybody from Backdrop in here? Then somebody will be like, yes, let me help you, because in our world, we are so new contributors, yeah, that you'll find that we give you an awful lot of attention. And you can follow us on Twitter at Backdrop CMS. So let's actually do the demo. We tried to shorten this presentation down, but it seemed to have taken the normal amount of time to do a demo of all of the functionality that's in Backdrop CMS. Let's see. Oh. Yeah, there's our chat channel. So if you haven't tried out Backdrop and you would like to, the easiest way is to, you can download Backdrop if you have a local host, of course, but you can also just spin up a site on Pantheon to do a demo. And so I'm not actually going to set up this Pantheon site, but I just wanted to show that you click there and then it'll spin up a Backdrop installation on Pantheon. And I already have one prepared here. So we'll do the installation of a Backdrop site to demonstrate configuration management. But before I do that, I'm going to be working on my local, and then we'll import everything via CMI into Pantheon when we're done.
There's a lot of stuff you might recognize right out of the box by looking at the site. It looks a lot like Drupal. There's a reason for that. We didn't change very much. There are a couple of significant differences. I mean, it's black and not blue. Woohoo! But It also has a menu bar across the top that's a little bit different. In Drupal 7 and in Drupal 8, they did a lot of work on a module called Toolbar, but we already had a really great contrib solution called Admin Menu that's still installed on more than 80% of Drupal sites that are out there. So rather than investing our own time and money into something new, we took what's proven in contrib and we ported Admin Menu into core for Backdrop. We made a couple of significant changes as doing that. You guys might notice that search box that's up there at the top. This is something that came from a usability study we did that's in a current dev version of Admin Menu if you want your Drupal 7 sites. You can type whatever it is you're looking for into that box and it'll show you where in the menu that link is that you should click. So that'll help people figure out where it is they're going in the UI, which is pretty cool. We also made this menu responsive and touch sensitive so that it'll work on phones and tablets. So if Nate squishes his window down, you'll notice that the links disappear when there's no longer room for them. And when you get down really small, you get icons instead of words, something like that. And then if you pop it open, it'll still work as a drop-down navigation even on mobile. Also, all of Backdrop is now responsive out of the box, which is kind of new. Drupal 8 does that, obviously. Drupal 7 does not. So if you're looking at starting a new project today, and you don't want to spend a bunch of time investing in making Drupal 7 responsive, Backdrop is basically responsive to Drupal 7. What's going on?
Sorry, I don't know why it's jumping around like that. There we go.
All right, so here is an example of the administrative interface. If you're editing a piece of content on a tablet, you'll notice that the vertical tabs down there at the bottom are responsive. They collapse nicely when you're on a mobile device. We don't quite have that yet for Drupal 7, but it is in the queue. We have contributed our work there back to the Drupal project. Do you want to show the rich text?
Oh yeah, right.
So we also put rich text editor in core. This is the kind of thing that obviously anyone with a CMS should have if Drupal 8 has it. But if you're going to start a new site in Drupal 7 today, you'd have to spend a lot of time setting one up because that hasn't been easy in Drupal. So we got it in core. In Backdrop, obviously, Nate did all of the work on getting that into Drupal 8. So we did the same thing all over again, getting into Backdrop. We've got some inline image capabilities, which is pretty cool. Also stuff that had been worked on before in Drupal 7. Improved in Backdrop, contributed back to Drupal. Improved in Drupal, contributed back to Backdrop. There's been a lot of great collaboration between the two projects on getting these guys going together, which is great. Also, if you scroll down and look at what's appearing in the vertical tabs, you can see some of the modules that we've added to core. We've got URL settings in there, token and path auto are in core. We also have redirects because we learned after putting path auto into core, we needed to have redirects as well so that if you change the title, the page will redirect nicely. Change the title, change the path redirects. Also, if you wanted to, what?
Go ahead.
Okay, I was like, are you trying to show something? I don't know. If you wanted to go and look at how our content types are created, we've done a bunch of user experience improvements in Backdrop. So our 1.3 release was a user experience focused release. We tried to make the job of a site builder a lot easier. So on the page where you create your content type, you now can define permissions for that content type. Instead of needing to go to the permissions page, you can also define the pattern for your URL, which is your path auto settings, just to keep you from jumping from place to place to place in the UI. So a little site builder experience improvements going on here.
You can also turn off revisions, which...
Turn off revisions. But also the ability to turn on and off those checkboxes for sticky and promoted. Just lets you clean up the UI for the editor as an administrator, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it's always strange that you have the ability to make pages sticky, like like a sticky or promoted page when it's like they're never shown in lists generally. So why would you have the option to make them sticky? Yeah, lots of minor improvements. Oh, and this is also like in the responsive world, responsive tabs at the top as well, which is really quite excellent. And I actually really like the small version of this tab experience that it. There you go, turns into a nice drop-down like experience. Yeah, I mean, very similar to Drupal 7, but we've also been working on making minor usability improvements. We tried really hard in the 1.3 release to minimize what we call pogo sticking. When you set up a new content type, okay, now we need to go, yeah, I know. But the pogo sticking concepts, yeah, reduced quite a bit here.
All right, so we've got two huge major features in Backdrop we'd like to show you. One of them is our layout system. So this is a big problem we've always had in Drupal, where it assumes you want one layout for every single page on your site. And we've come up with a bunch of really great solutions to that in Contrib. We have context module, panels module, some really crazy stuff you can do with your themes. But the underlying problem was just that Drupal was built in an era where one layout for every page on your site worked. We've never really gone back to that. So we wanted to solve that problem in core for Backdrop. So we took the panels module, ported it, and wrote an entirely new user interface because nobody really likes that user interface that was on panels. What we've come up with here is layouts. By default, you can have two. There's one for the front end of your site and one for the back end of your site. That's because right now on the back end of your site, usually where you see the admin theme, it's a single column layout. We wanted to carry forward into Backdrop as well, so we've got a single column layout on the back. And on the front, we have one that's provided by default that does work for every page on your site. So if that model worked for you, great, it's already done. And you can change this the same way you change layouts on panels, where you can drag and drop things from place to place. So something super frustrating for me in blocks land is where you have to drag and drop, but in a list, you can't actually see where things are going to go. This is just a visual representation of where these items go on the page. We've also made some improvements to the process of adding a block to a page here. So if you click any one of these links for adding a block, it'll let you search for the block from a list the same way you would search for a field in a view. You can find something like, I don't know, add whatever you want. And when you go to add it, we took some of the other things that people really love from the views UI, like the ability to control your markup, and drop that here into the block world too. So by default, you can add CSS classes to any block when you drop them in. That makes a lot of sense. But if you wanted to go really crazy, you can also control the wrapper tag around that block. You can change it to an aside or a section. You can add whatever classes you want there. You can change the heading tag. If you don't want it to be an H2, I spent a lot of time overwriting block templates and changing those heading tags. You've got that option here. You can change the tag around the content. You don't want that to be a div tag. You want it to be a P, or you don't want anything there at all. You can remove that. So we've given people the tools that they loved in views in the Blocks UI 2, trying to make that a consistent experience anywhere you're putting anything onto the page. We also have visibility conditions. This just allows you to decide when a block should appear. This is the same thing we had in Drupal, but these visibility conditions not only affect when the block appears on the page, but they'll also affect when a particular layout is in use. So we can demonstrate that as well. So layouts ships with 10 different layouts that comes. You can choose your arrangement of blocks, but you can also add any other layout if you wanted to. Those are called layout templates. We tried to cover the most common use cases here, including one that matches the Bartik layout. So if you're upgrading from Drupal 7 and you were using Bartik, you've still got that crazy layout in there. We named it after Jen Simmons, its creator. All the others are city mayors, I suppose.
And all of these layouts, this was added just in the most recent release. These are all Bootstrap 4 grid system based. So there's actually only one CSS file, and then each of the templates is just using classes in different combinations to create each one of these different layouts.
And the idea there is that you can just copy an existing layout and change classes. You can get exactly what you need out of it without needing to do a lot of your own CSS Flexbox magic to get that going. And we've got float fallbacks for browsers that don't support the Flexbox. But yeah, layouts in Backdrop are a top-level concept, just like modules or themes. And we separated the layout from the theme specifically so that if you change your theme, you don't break your entire website and need to reposition all of your blocks. So that's the biggest kind of mind bender in terms of building a Backdrop site, is like, where do I put the code for the theme versus the layout? And most people are used to separating them anyway, because your CSS often has a grid system that's separate from an aesthetic component. Now it's just separated even a little bit more. Rather than having two separate files in your theme, you've got two separate projects. One's a theme and one's a collection of layouts. But we don't have much time yet.
Yeah, let's
do a node override, or?
Yeah, let's, so normally what we do is we add a view to show that views is in core. There's nothing special about the views that's in Backdrop. It's essentially the same thing, but we'll make like a recent content block. And we will, instead of creating a page, we will create a block. And yeah, the interface here for views is identical, except that we integrated it with a core dialog system, so we're not dependent upon CTools. We have built-in dialogue system that's used consistently. We saw it on the node form too. So we end up with, in layouts, we have dialogues kind of all over the place. So views, pretty much the same. You probably will find that making page views is a lot less common in Backdrop because we have layouts. And the most typical thing for you to do if you wanted to create a new page, like let's say we wanted to make a front page, like how do you do landing pages in Drupal is always this like endless conundrum of I just want a page that has a bunch of blocks on it. It doesn't have any main content really, like your front page doesn't have anything except for a bunch of other lists basically, or a landing page of videos or whatever. Like I've seen people like make like a node and then just like not put anything in it, and then just position a bunch of blocks on the page, or make one view and then position a bunch of blocks around that view. But in the world of Backdrop, what you would do instead is if you wanted to make a new landing page, like a custom front page, then you would just create a layout and then just make up whatever path you want. So let's say I want my front page to use the crazy Bartik-like layout with the 3, 3, 4 columns. Then I would just create something at a path, and I can just make up any arbitrary path I want. You can set up visibility conditions if you want like only certain roles to see things, or you can set up a different like front page for a logged in user than from a logged out user, and they would be completely separate collections of layouts. But since we want everybody to see this, we will just leave it as is. And if none of the visibility conditions matches for an entire layout, then it just falls back to the default layout. So here's now a completely different arrangement. You can see it kind of moved over the blocks that were available from the default layout. So I added stuff to the sidebar in the default layout, so it pre-populated all of the blocks that I had from the default layout into this one, which also is important to include things like the header and the navigation and the breadcrumb and things like that. But I can add that recent content block or recent content view. And I could, like populate all of these things with something or other. Yeah, and I mean, this is something you couldn't do in Drupal 7 is use the same block multiple times. Like obviously you can place the block multiple times, and each time you place it, you can have different settings because it's per instance configurations of each block that you add. There we go, and save. And there we go. Now I've made a new path at /front, and here it is with my recent content view, and then my grid of, I put something in each one of these 4 columns. So really cool. Like you can just make up any old arbitrary path that you want and place any collection of blocks that you want on it.
You also have the ability to override any page that's already there. So if we wanted to create a layout for example, a post that was different than that for a page, you can go ahead and do that. You can choose a layout, and when you enter the path, what you want to do is add an existing path that Backdrop already knows about. So we would type in something like node/%, and that would trigger a node. And if this is a path that Backdrop does already know about, it'll automatically populate that section called contexts. Context is something that's really hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around in the Drupal world, so we wanted as much of this to be automatic and you don't really need to understand as possible. But as soon as Backdrop is able to predict and add a context for you, you can add visibility conditions that are dependent on that context. So now we have new options in this list that can include things like sort by node type. It knows there's a node there, it knows you can check its type, it'll give you new options here. So we can say only use this layout when the node is of type post.
Yeah, so I used the Moscone layout here, which has the sidebar on the left-hand side instead of on the right-hand side, which is the default.
So again, it'll copy all of your default blocks from your default content, but now it's got the sidebars flipped.
Yeah, and you can add blocks that are specific to this kind of content. Like I can add the image field, if I want to place the image separately, or if I want to place the image like in the sidebar or something like that, then I can just move any field. I can rearrange this entire page. And actually, you can even remove, if you so wanted, the main page content, and it won't render the main page content, and you can lay it out instead with all just a collection of blocks. So a completely alternative way of building out a page instead of using a display mode.
Let's go take a look at it. Content.
So this is the default layout. It's not. I didn't actually make the default layout, and then then there's front. That is the front page layout that we created, and a post. Let's see. We need to actually find one that is a post. This is a post because it has an image attached to it, and you can see that that image block is placed over here. If I were actually doing this, I would edit the display mode to not show the image here, so that we wouldn't end up with a duplicate. But you can see the sidebars on the left-hand side now instead of on the right-hand side like the home page. So you can have as many different pages, as many different layouts as you want. And you can change your theme, and they're entirely separate from each other. So you can use any theme with any collection of layouts. They're no longer bound to each other. Like there's no such thing as a 3-column theme anymore. Every theme is always responsive, and every theme always has multiple layouts available because layouts are not just entirely separate. You actually can, if you want more layouts.
We're running out of time.
Okay, sorry.
So the last killer feature in Backdrop is configuration management. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a configuration management interface to export all of this work that Nate has been doing on his local site and deploy it to our Pantheon site. So there's a UI here, gives you an option to do a full export of the entire site. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and it'll zip up a tarball and deliver it to you.
Can I show the JSON files?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's inside the tarball is a bunch of JSON files that contains all of the configuration from your site. So if we wanted to open one of those up, which Nate's going to find a little bit, you can see what it looks like. Backdrop chose JSON instead of YAML for the format for several reasons. Number one, it's familiar to the lowest common denominator of web developers. Almost everybody knows what JSON is. YAML's a little more rare. So you can open it up, you can see it, it looks familiar. Another thing is that JSON has native PHP parsing, ends up being about 75 times faster than YAML. So we can store these files and read these files directly off of disk. We don't need to have a cache in the database.
Yep.
Which keeps
So-
it fast.
So this is the configuration of that front page layout, for example, is stored in JSON. And everything is stored in JSON from a configuration standpoint. Content types, menus, all of the settings for every configuration form, all of your views, all of your fields. It's all stored in JSON files, which makes it so that you can move the configuration in between environments separate from the content to any site or environment that you want.
So we're going to go ahead and take this zip file that Nate just got from his local site.
Oh, I haven't actually created it yet, so let me.
You were opening.
Sorry.
All right. And then we're going to go ahead and import it on Pantheon, and you'll notice that all of the changes that we just made, creating new layouts and creating new views, will be available on the Pantheon site.
Yeah, so this is a brand new site. We'll actually need to run through the installer because it literally has nothing whatsoever.
So Backdrop was all pretty fast.
What's that?
This is kind of sick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So unlike Drupal 8, active configuration in Backdrop is stored in files?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could go into the system default and change your site name and reload the page, and it'll be up there. There's no cache in between. There are some systems that contain additional layers of caching, things like views that contain their own cache that sits on top. But a lot of the variables, most modules configurations will just be read directly out of that file.
Yeah. It's so fast that it doesn't need a cache. In the case of settings files, there is a memory cache, so once it's read off of disk once per request, of course. But like Jen said, there's caches on some things, but a lot of things it's all just right off of disk.
All right, so this is the new Pantheon site. You'll notice that it looks a little blank slatey. So what we're going to do is go to the configuration management page, which is under development. And then here we've got a tool to import. And here we're going to upload the tarball that we downloaded from our local site. And this is also something you can usually do via Git, like if you want to make deploys. But we're showing you the user interface here because that is much prettier. And so when you hit stage, what it'll do is it'll compare the current state of the configuration with your site with all of the files that you just imported, and it'll show you what's changed. And that'll give developers a chance to make a little visual review. Oh, I didn't need to change that. They can put it back. Or they can examine closely what exactly was it that changed.
Yeah. Like I used a different email address when I configured this site than when I did my local site. We saved the page content type, so there's some differences here. Actually, these are mostly type differences, but yeah. You can see every change that we made from the local site as compared to this Pantheon site that is a fresh slate. And of course the new things like the front page, the post content, the recent content view and things like that.
So you run the import, and it'll override all of the existing configuration files with the new one. It'll run any database changes that need to be done. So if you need to add fields, it'll add tables to hold that data. And then when you go look at your site, you can see all of the stuff that you just built is now imported. So we've got a post content layout, we've got a front page layout, it's got our content in the right place on it.
Yeah, and yep, and that's it. And so I'm sure if you guys are regular Drupal developers, you may have run into the features module and the way that we abuse it in Drupal 7. This is probably just straight up alone because of the compatibility between Drupal 7 and Backdrop is so great that picking it up is a trivial operation. You could become, if you're a Backdrop or Drupal developer, you could become like a Backdrop expert in a weekend. Like it's really similar. And just the saving of time that you could gain from never having to futz with features again could be worth the payoff of even just upgrading your site from Drupal 7 to Backdrop.
And the responsiveness out of the box too. That's really...
Yeah, there's just so many things that are just like, Drupal 7 is so old. Like its version of jQuery is ancient. Like, can you get Drupal 7 running the latest version of jQuery? It's like, well...
You can. Update module.
We didn't yet cover this, but this is really cool too. So this is, again, something new in the latest version. If you had a module that you wanted to install, this is on Pantheon. So before I do this, in Pantheon mode, before you manipulate the file system, you need to switch to SFTP mode. So if I switch to SFTP mode, then I can go over here to install modules, and we have an in-browser, in-project ability to install modules from backdropcms.org. So if I wanted to install the web form module, for example, I can just hit add to installation queue. Drupal 7 has actually always had the ability to install modules through the UI, but it only lets you browse, like upload a zip file, or it's a URL. You paste in a URL. So we left the ability to install functionality, but we added the user interface to actually browse and find these modules. So I can install something from backdropcms.org just by saying, I want to install the web form module. It downloads it from backdropcms.org, unzips it, asks me if I want to turn on the module after I've downloaded it, and then I turn it on, and then that's it. So now I've downloaded and installed new functionality on my Pantheon website. So now I can go over here and I can add web form content, for example. So just that easy. Very cool.
That's it.
That's it. That's the demo. Do you guys have any questions?
Do you have a roadmap for what you hope to put in the next several weeks?
We do.
Yeah.
So if you go to backdropcms.org/roadmap, which can also be found in our handbook, what we have right now is a plan for version 1.5, which comes out September 15th. And usually during the course of this release, we'll kind of figure out what is necessary for the next release. This early, it's a little hard because we don't have a lot of users. So trying to figure out like what's most important is always in flux. Where it's like, okay, you guys have sites. What are you missing? Okay, now what are you missing? Now what are you missing? So for 1.5, we're planning on putting in references modules, so something like entity reference that exists for Drupal. We're planning on putting in new front-end themes, so it doesn't look like Bartik. We're hoping to put in something you can actually ship with, something that's a little more blank slate and easy to customize, drop in your logo, change your colors, make it look more real world and less dated. We're hoping to put in, there's some other stuff that's not on this list too, a homepage layout by default, so that you can change what's there rather than needing to add your own. We're going to be putting in a hero block type so that you can put in images that rotate or I don't know, whatever you want to make your homepage look a little fancier. There's a lot of little teeny tiny things. If you want to go to the 1.5 milestone, if you're interested in the minutia, they're all on the GitHub queue tagged with a particular milestone. As we work on it, other things will come up. They'll get brought up every week. We have a meeting. We'll talk about them, and if they seem super important, we'll put them on the roadmap for a release in the future. So, if you have a request, you can bring it up. We talk about it. Yes.
Is it possible and or easy to migrate a Backdrop site to Drupal 7 if you decided you wanted to do that?
From Backdrop to Drupal, It's actually,
It's possible.
it's possible. You could use the migrate module to actually move from off of Backdrop onto Drupal, or in Drupal 8 world, it's not quite fully possible to import from Drupal 7 into Drupal 8 yet, but as soon as it is possible, that migration could easily be adapted because the database table structure for Backdrop is almost identical to that of Drupal 7. So I haven't seen tools available to do that yet, but because of the similarities, it would be trivial for that functionality to be supported.
If you're going to use the migrate module, that's meant to get you from anything to anything else, right? So migrate module exists for Drupal 7. You can get from WordPress to Drupal 7. You can get from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7. You can definitely get from Backdrop to Drupal 7 because they're very similar. I would imagine, though, most people would probably not want to move backwards in time 5 years. It would be people who are unsure about moving to Drupal 8 might want to go 7, Backdrop, and then 8 later if they don't like where Backdrop's headed. And that's definitely going to be easier because Backdrop is kind of like one step closer to 8 with it's already got its configuration in sort of a similar format, and that would be the anticipated course.
Do you have an approximate number of live sites that are using Backdrop right now?
There's a couple hundred, I would guess between 200 and 300.
Yeah.
We've got usage statistics tracking, but we haven't started publishing those numbers because we're a little bit worried they're not accurate.
Oh no, it's there. I think that it's just not.
It's not public.
It's just not linked. It is public.
I don't think it is. Other people haven't had access to that page.
So this is So if sure. There's logged out. There we go. So it is public. Yeah. So 245 sites that are out there in production that we know about.
But we took the project usage numbers from Drupal.org and found a lot of problems with the counting. So we've been trying to fix that up.
Yeah, we found out that accidentally our test bots, our test runs, were counting as usages. And when I first built this, I was like, "There's 20,000 Backdrop websites out there." Turns out we just run the test 20,000 times. So it's like, oops.
He's wondering why Drupal's numbers look so large. It's probably something going
We're definitely a much smaller community because we're new. But we've been moving along, and Jen does all of her client work now is all Backdrop driven, and we know of lots of Backdrop sites that are out there. And it's actually funny, the people that we don't hear about,
there's obviously 200 of them.
Yeah, while we're collecting the statistics, we track the IP address to make sure that we don't get duplicates, but then when it's aggregated, the IP address is discarded. But I was looking through, I was like, who are these people running these Backdrop websites?
That's good though. That's our particular target audience is not the kind of people who are super plugged into the Drupal community. So the fact that we're able to build a tool and people are using it and we haven't heard from them means we're hitting our audience, because those aren't going to be people who are in the issue queue being I want to change the world. They're people who are I need a tool to do my job, and that's it. So I think that's a great sign, especially this early.
Do you guys have a sense of verticals or industries?
So because we have small, medium business, nonprofit in our tagline, that's who we're focused on. I've been talking to a lot of nonprofits. I've been talking to a lot of small businesses, so I know they're interested. I have no idea beyond that, if there are major educational institutions or government that are all kind of examining. All I know is from conversations at groups like this, where I go and talk to people and they're like, "Oh, we're looking at whatever." I'm like, "Oh, that's great," but we don't have any metrics on that yet.
Yeah, and then in the nonprofit space, we also know that Civi CRM is a really popular tool for managing nonprofits, and we've
been doing a lot of work on Civi and Backdrop too. We've got a working version of Civi. We've got some of the add-on modules are still getting cleaned up, but
but we did recently get it so that the installer for Civi, you can download Civi and just plop it into a Backdrop site, and you can run the installer and everything. Yeah, so
we're definitely focused on since we want to be a tool for nonprofits, we're looking at what nonprofits need most and trying to make sure we get those things going.
I've talked to some people about Backdrop at this camp, and some of them seem worried about what would happen if you guys let's say you got sick of tired of working on Backdrop tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's our vision for success is the two of us being able to walk away from the project and it to continue without us. And so we have core committers that aren't me. We have a project management committee that can take over leadership, and I think that over time those will continue to grow as our community grows. Right now I feel like we probably need a couple more core committers.
Yeah, we have 3 right now. We added Jeff St. Pierre and Andy Wilmot. And so we've got, Andy does documentation, and Serendipity does all of the code as well. So we're working on, I mean, sustainability is definitely...
That's our metric for success. So we're definitely worried about that as well. And initially we're like, we don't care, let's just get it out. And we got it out, and as soon as we got it out, we're like, okay, now it's time to make it, get it done, and then let's make it stronger. So now we've got a management structure in place. We're getting more core committers involved. We also have a couple of other people we're like hoping to tap for core committer roles in the near future.
And we've got people like Jim that are doing marketing for us.
Yeah. But we definitely want to make sure, we want to make sure this will long live after us. And that's kind of one of the reasons we didn't want to use the VDFL model. We had a bunch of people in our issue queue really early on that's like, I would be fully in support of VDFL if Jen and Nate wanted to do it. And we're like, that's not really what we want. We want to be able to leave and have it exist. So we
not that there's any plan to do that.
Right, no, not yet, but we need to be able to, this to continue without us.
Wait.
Yeah, so to the affordability objective, one of the things that's always struck me with Drupal as being potentially scary or downside affordability-wise if you're a smaller entity or a blog or whatever, and you don't want to have your web guy on the side on call all the time, is that, so with Drupal, if you need to do a security update, chances are you're also pulling in a ton of new code because they released the security update, but they hadn't had a release for 8 months, the contrib module or whatever, and who knows what else it's going to do and what it's going to blow up. Is there, I guess, would you think about a model where when a security release happens, you also do just the security release, right? Just do the regex, the validate.
So we are doing that already in Backdrop core, right? We have this semantic versioning with 3 numbers. The first number is the API compatibility, the second number is the feature compatibility, and the third number is usually bug fixes, which include security fixes. And when we come out with a new version of Backdrop 1.4, we'll also come out with a version of Backdrop 1.3 that just has the security changes. So we are kind of following that model a little bit in core. We're also encouraging all of our contrib projects to use that same semantic versioning scheme. So we're kind of saying if you want an official release on Backdrop CMS.org, it has to be this way. Now, we can't control what developers actually do with those numbers, but we are trying to kind of set the precedent that 1.1 are features for 1.1 and 1.2 are features for 1.2, and if you have a security fix, it's 1.2.1. And so we've got the framework set up.
Yeah.
In hopes that will happen.
Is there so for core, is there a life cycle where you say version 1.2 is going to be supported for N amount of time before we stop issuing security fixes for it?
At this point, we haven't yet felt strongly, the need hasn't been strong enough yet for us to support old point releases for a longer period of time than, if there actually were a security issue that were critically important, we probably would go backward and apply to 1.4, 1.3, 1.2, and make it so that all of the minor releases would also get updates. But that hasn't yet come up as being a problem.
But yeah, we have been doing minor security releases in conjunction with Drupal, especially around views module too. So when there are contrib module level security releases, we do a core release of Backdrop. And we have done those to more than just the latest version. So you don't have to take in the new features. And we're also being really careful because of our backwards compatibility thing, at least in core, even if you upgrade to 1.4 from 1.0, you don't have to turn on all the modules we put in there, right? You don't need email field if you're not using email fields. You're not going to get a bunch of stuff forced on you that you didn't want. So.
Yeah, our pattern for new minor releases is that when you update, there's no new functionality. Even though new functionality has been added, none of it is turned on. It doesn't change your site the way it functions at all. It just makes it so you have the option to enable those things.
Even true, we put in a bunch of new layouts, but if you're using the old layouts, you got the old layouts, and you have to go manually say, I want to use the new layouts before they become available. Yeah. So.
Cool.
Yeah, and for people that use Pantheon, we maintain upstream, so when new versions come out, it just notifies you here. I think that I probably have, where's my account dashboard?
It's,
there we go.
There.
So this site over here that we're working on Drush, for example, like when updates are available, like they get pushed out to Pantheon, just like Drupal does, and you just
have Pantheon sites?
hit apply updates.
And so I'm interested to see that Backdrop is really supported on Pantheon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally supported.
So we are friends with the folks over at Pantheon. We've been working really closely with Greg Anderson, who's one of the Drush maintainers, to make sure we get Drush and Backdrop working well together, because that's our blocker for getting this to be like Pantheon supports WordPress and Backdrop and Drupal, right? Like that's kind of our end goal. But we do already have integration. You can already run it from the backdropcms.org site, and we've got one blocker left before it becomes publicly available for anyone to do on Pantheon without knowing about our website.
So what, I think what she means is you can't go to Pantheon and.
That's what it does.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not on the main list.
not on the list
Backdrop
yet.
site.
Yeah. And we just have to get, like, the issue is you can see it right here on main screen, the checkbox that says run update you left it.
It's fine.
Run update.php when you apply these updates. That checkbox does not actually run update.php. And as soon as we can get that working, then we can get that to be on Pantheon's, like, choose the site page.
Somebody was telling me the other day that it started showing up, but it's not. It's in the distributions list for some reason. So
Yeah,
it's not
site
up here.
distribution.
It's not up here in the list. It's supposedly down here somewhere, but it's not. See, I don't know. Some people have said that they see it, and I haven't ever seen
Maybe
it.
it appears once you already have one.
But I do already have one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
for right
we
now,
know-
you have to visit backdropcms.org and just hit the hit the button on the homepage.
Yeah.
And it actually is just
Or you can go to pantheon.io/backdrop. But,
yeah.
Yeah, we know as soon as we get that checkbox working, it's good to go. But it does have all the support you want right now. There is one sticky point to doing things on Pantheon, and that's our treatment of CMI. By default, the JSON files that are generated while your configuration are stored in your files directory. So you have to be really careful when you're syncing from live to test and test to dev that you don't accidentally overwrite your files that you've been working on dev with your files that you've imported from live, because your configuration are mixed in there with your files. So we've got a blog post in the works that'll explain how to get around that problem on Pantheon by moving your staging directory outside of the files directory. But that's the only thing. So we'll get the checkbox fixed, we'll write the blog post, and then everyone will be running on Pantheon.
Yeah, we also, because Pantheon is kind of expensive and we have low system requirements, is one of our objectives. Jen spun up a site recently on
Namecheap.
Namecheap.
$10 a year.
$10 a year hosting.
It's totally working.
Totally blazing,
And they
yeah.
let you choose a PHP version, and so I put on PHP 7 because I wanted to make sure it was fast, right? And I opened an issue because I wanted to figure out how to change some of the like default PHP settings for PHP 7, and the techs at Namecheap were like, "Are you sure your CMS supports PHP 7? None of our other CMSs run on PHP 7," and I'm like, "Oh no, I'm sure." It was really great to be like the first CMS that's like fully functional on PHP 7. But they also support WordPress and Drupal, so it seemed like a no-brainer to give Backdrop a try there. But $10 a year.
On other shared hosting, and it sort of works. I mean, it depends on how they.
It depends on the site, yeah, for
How much
sure.
they care about speed.
Yeah, speed, and also like how many giant PDF files we're going to be sticking up there.
Yeah, I want to say something about speed. I know we're totally out of time, but I hope you guys don't mind that we'll just keep going because it's the last thing of the day. But under here, under the performance page, this is specifically for sort of low-end hosting. We have this feature called background fetch, which is we took a page out of Varnish's book Varnish 4's book that when you request a page and let's say the page cache is on 5 minutes, but it's been half an hour since somebody last requested a page, what Backdrop will do is it will take the request and say, get the cache, and say, oh, this cache is too old. But instead of throwing it away and then generating the page, what it does is it returns the old result anyway, and then it flushes the output buffer and then starts generating the page in the background so that the next user that visits the page will get the fresh copy. So you don't have the slow first request problem where it's like nobody's visited this page in a day.
You gotta wait.
Yeah. So it's slow the first time. Instead, it just always returns the last cache copy that it had, and then generates a new cache copy in the background. So you never have a slow page load, except for the very, 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 very first time that the page is ever loaded. So that's really cool. And we also do that for cron runs and things like that, background tasks that in Drupal, when uses the poor man's cron if cron hasn't run. Like this happens on development sites all the time, that you haven't visited your dev site since
Oh, it's so slow.
since yesterday. So the first time, every morning when you load your dev site, it takes like 30 seconds to load the first page, and that's because it's running the cron tasks at the end. And what we do is we generate the page, and then we enter background processing mode, and then we run cron after the page has been flushed back to the user.
Yeah.
So you're not held up on the background processing.
So we've been on a bunch of kind of performance improvements too. Nate's big thing is he's a performance engineer, and so he spent a lot of time in the Drupal queue arguing for performance improvements, and he was fairly successful with some of them and less successful with others. But in Backdrop, Nate's like, oh, I'm going to fix this, and then he'll take the fix and go put it in the Drupal queue and be like, hey guys, I just made the page load 95% less memory usage or whatever, and then it'll eventually get into Drupal. They'll do a bunch of reviewing on it, maybe make a tweak, and then it comes back to Backdrop and we take the tweak. So there's also a lot of collaboration, not only in user experience, but in performance between the two as well. So we have a little faster cycle to getting things in, so we can get them in, and then they can improve them, and then we can improve them, and then...
Yeah, we made parsing of info files take 95% less memory and execute like 36 times faster or something like that. And that went back to Drupal
Yep.
as well. It's in the current version of Drupal, but originated in Backdrop. So we collaborate whenever possible.
Yay, open source!
Yeah, when I first heard about Backdrop, I had the impression that it was sort of a revolt. And so I wondered what the relationship is now between your group and the...
It was sort of a revolt originally. We were obviously really fed up with the way that things were going in Drupal 8. But the kind of the goal is like, we love Drupal. That's why we were so passionate about it initially, is because it was solving all these great problems and doing a bunch of great things for us. But the end goal is not to be like angry at each other, right? Like we had really long, intense conversations with the engineers before we forked about like, how can we do this in a really positive way for the community? Trying to figure out how to do it together and not how to do it against each other. And I think that has proven true in the issue queue and the security queue, and for usability. Like there's a bunch of places in performance that we are actually doing a really good job of working together and making both better. I think there was also a really bad impression initially from the Drupal community, because everybody does take this so seriously. It's personally offensive when somebody says, I don't like the way you're doing it, right? And so there were people in the Drupal community, even when we weren't angry, saying like, oh my god, I can't believe they would do that. But now it's been long enough that everybody understands why. They understand, oh, Drupal 8 is really different from Drupal 7. I didn't know that before. I hadn't seen it. I can understand why we need something that's an alternative, even if I don't agree with it. There are a bunch of people who don't agree with it. That's totally fine. We don't agree with a bunch of people too. But we all still can kind of get along and say there's a place in the market for an enterprise CMS, and it's kind of small little brother that's specifically geared towards nonprofits, smaller sites, small, medium-sized business with specific goals in mind. So I think having both of them will make both stronger, and we're not mad.
Yeah, although we kind of botched the initial announcement, so that's probably
We
where
were mad.
Yeah, that
Now
was
we're really happy.
that was the problem, is that back then we didn't have anything to show. We didn't have a real piece
Project,
of software,
yeah.
so we couldn't actually
We
say
couldn't
like
prove it.
why are we different and what are we doing. We really just only had the message that we didn't like where Drupal 8 was going. And so as time has gone on, we've focused a lot less on criticizing Drupal 8, because now we have something else to show that
Plus,
we can
Drupal 8 also
demonstrate.
has something to show too, where it's like initially we didn't really know where Drupal 8 was going, right? We didn't see its destination either. So now we've got two destinations, and they're obviously different. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Matt?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, but isn't that relationship, it seems like it will have to eventually end. Let's say
Yeah.
Drupal 9 comes out, Drupal 7 is no longer supported, and
Yeah, for sure. That's why it's a fork, right? That you fork a software when you feel like you need to go in a different direction. And right now, Drupal 7 and Backdrop are so similar that it's really easy to get this code right back and forth. But it's already to the point that like you fix a problem with Drupal 7, you can't get the code back and forth to 8 because there's no patch. It's not similar enough. And so as soon as 7 becomes not only end of life but irrelevant, the relationship between Drupal and Backdrop is going to be very different, right?
And we'll need to start having our own events instead of piggybacking on Drupal camps.
Right, and we're definitely prepared for that. We know, like, right now, our major target audience are people who know Drupal because we are the same thing as Drupal 7. At some point, everybody who's running Drupal 7 will have already decided to go to Drupal 8 or WordPress or wherever it is they're going. And it's not going to do us any good to come to a Drupal camp where every session is on Drupal 8 and everybody's already moved on to Drupal 8 and everyone's talking about what's coming in Drupal 9 because it doesn't matter to our users and it doesn't matter to the people who are there. So we do have plans. We already have events that are starting to separate a little bit. We have a Backdrop Summit. We're going to start working on a Drop Camp, probably 2017.
Tentatively named.
TM. But yeah, it's definitely right now is a really good time for that positive relationship. But over time, it's a fork for a reason. Like we're going different directions, and we'll have our own community and our own security team and our own everything in the long run.
Well, let's call it for as far as presentation. You guys can talk to us afterwards if you guys still have more questions.
We have a dragon. He's our mascot. If you believe in this project and want to make a contribution, we have wonderful thank you gifts. If you'd like to make a contribution of code or $25, we'll give you this beautiful t-shirt with the dragon on it. Or if you want to make a contribution of $50 or more, you can have a very soft, warm hoodie. I know it's cold in this room. Some of you are probably like, man, I wish you had a dragon hoodie to put on right now. We're definitely open to that. And also, any ideas you want to contribute, we are open to hearing those as well. So feel free to come talk to us.
Okay, thank you.